My family abandoned me when I was poor. Now that I'm successful, they want me back. Hey Reddit, my name's Jason, and I'm 21. My life now looks entirely different from how it did 3 years ago, but it wasn't always like this. At 18, I was broke, struggling to survive, and abandoned by my family. We had a decent relationship when I was younger, but when things got tough, they disappeared. Now, after building my own success, they're trying to reconnect, but for all the wrong reasons. This is the story of how I clawed my way out of the pit I was left in, and what happened when my family suddenly wanted me back after years of silence. My family, like many others, wasn't poor, but we were nowhere near financially stable. My parents, Laura and David, were always more concerned about appearances than reality. It's strange when you think about how much time and energy can go into keeping up the illusion of success, even when you're struggling just to pay bills. Our house was always clean, always tidy, but it was filled with tension. Everything we owned seemed more like props in a show than actual necessities. When I was younger, I didn't understand why my parents fought so much. It was always about money, who spent what, where the next paycheck was going to come from, whether we'd ever catch up to my mom's sister, Aunt Sarah. Aunt Sarah, to them, represented everything they didn't have: a big house, 2 cars, vacations to Europe. They were obsessed with this idea of wealth, but not with the hard work that goes into achieving it. One night when I was around 14, I overheard a particularly vicious fight. My parents had been arguing in the kitchen, voices raised to the point where I could hear every word from my room upstairs. My mom, frustrated and crying, accused my dad of being a failure because we couldn't afford a better life. "Why can't you be more like Sarah's husband? He's always bringing in more money, always moving up in his job. We can't even afford a proper vacation," she had yelled, her voice breaking. "We don't need a vacation. We need to stop spending money we don't have," my dad shot back, his voice angrier than usual. I remember sitting in the dark that night, thinking about how money controlled everything in our house, how it poisoned our lives. It wasn't just about whether we had enough, it was about the constant pressure to appear as though we had more. I swore to myself that when I grew up, I'd make enough money not just to survive, but to live comfortably and, most importantly, to be free from the stress that came with it. By the time I was 18, I had dreams of going to college, getting a degree, and building a life that wasn't dependent on my parents' mistakes. I was accepted into a university, but when I sat down with my parents to talk about finances, everything fell apart. I had expected them to help me with college expenses, but instead, they blindsided me. "We can't afford to help you, Jason," my dad said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "You'll have to figure something out on your own." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking with shock. "You've always said you'd help me." That college was the way to a better future. "Plans change," my mom said quietly. "We're not in a position to support you right now. Maybe next year." Next year? I was supposed to start in the fall. The sudden shift in their attitude was like being punched in the gut. It was like they were giving up on me, on the future they had spent years telling me to chase. I tried to reason with them, reminding them about their promises, about how important college was. But they didn't budge. They had bought a new car just a month earlier, something I knew they could have avoided, but here they were telling me they couldn't afford to help with my education. In the end, I didn't have a choice. I deferred my college acceptance and took a job to save up some money. It felt like my dreams had been ripped out from under me. The anger and resentment started to build, but I knew I couldn't waste time feeling sorry for myself. I had to survive. After that conversation with my parents, I knew I couldn't stay at home anymore. The atmosphere in the house had become unbearable. Every interaction was laced with passive-aggressive comments about money, my future, and how ungrateful I was for expecting help. So, with what little savings I had from my part-time high school job, I moved out. The apartment I found was the cheapest I could afford, located in a rundown part of town, with peeling paint, a leaky faucet, and neighbors who seemed to fight as much as my parents did. The walls were thin, so I could hear everything: arguments, late-night parties, even the occasional police siren wailing nearby. But it was mine, and it was better than living under my parents' roof. My job was as a cashier at a local grocery store, working the late shift to make ends meet. The work was monotonous, and standing for hours behind the counter, scanning groceries, and forcing a smile took its toll. My feet ached at the end of every shift, and my back hurt from lifting bags of canned goods and heavy groceries. I'll never forget the feeling of dread that would wash over me when I'd get home at night. My apartment was dark and empty, with no one to talk to and nothing to distract me from how alone I felt. My high school friends had all moved away for college, and I wasn't in touch with anyone from my old life. The only company I had was my thoughts, and those were rarely comforting. Most nights, I'd collapse on the worn-out couch I had picked up from a thrift store and stare at the ceiling, wondering how my life had spiraled so quickly. I was supposed to be at college, making new friends, learning, growing, building a future. Instead, I was scraping by, barely making enough to pay rent and buy groceries. One day, I came home from work to find an eviction notice taped to my door. I was 2 weeks late on rent and had no way to pay it. I sat on the floor of my apartment, staring at the paper, feeling utterly hopeless. I was 18 years old, broke, and on the verge of being homeless. For the first time in months, I thought about calling my parents. Maybe they would help. Maybe they'd feel guilty and give me a little money to get by. But then I remembered how cold they had been when I told them I couldn't afford college. I knew they wouldn't help, not really. Even if they gave me money, it would come with strings attached, with guilt and shame. I couldn't do it. I had to figure it out on my own. The eviction notice had shaken me to my core. I was running out of time, out of options. After losing my apartment, I crashed on a friend's couch for a few weeks while I desperately searched for a new place. Every job I applied for felt like a dead end, minimum wage, long hours, no benefits. It was soul-crushing, but I knew I had no choice. I was spending most of my days scouring the internet, looking for job listings or any opportunity that could get me out of this situation. I was at a rundown internet cafe, my usual spot, when I stumbled across something unexpected. It was an ad for a freelance web design project. They were looking for someone to build a basic website for a small business, and while the pay wasn't great, it was better than what I was making at the grocery store. I had always been good with computers and had learned some basic coding in high school, but I had never thought about doing it for money. Still, I had nothing to lose, so I applied. To my surprise, I got the job. I spent the next few days glued to my laptop, teaching myself more about web design. I watched YouTube tutorials, read online forums, and practiced coding until my eyes hurt. When I finished the project, the client was thrilled. I got paid, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my life. It wasn't much, but it was something. That one project led to more. Word started to spread, and soon I was getting small gigs here and there, designing websites, creating logos, doing odd tech jobs for local businesses. I wasn't making a lot of money yet, but it was enough to get back on my feet. I moved into a slightly better apartment and finally got out of that hole I had been stuck in. But it wasn't easy. I was working constantly, sometimes staying up all night to finish a project on time. The clients were demanding, and I had to deal with a lot of rejections. There were times when I questioned whether this was sustainable, whether I should just give up and go back to a regular 9-to-5 job. But something inside me wouldn't let me quit. I had tasted a bit of independence, a bit of success, and I wanted more. As I gained more experience in web design and freelancing, I started to think about the bigger picture. Why limit myself to freelance work when I could start my own business? I had the skills, the clients, and now, the drive to create something of my own. The decision to start my own business wasn't easy. It was risky, and there was no guarantee it would work. But I knew that I couldn't keep working for other people forever. I wanted control over my own life, my own destiny. I wanted to be the one making the decisions, not just following orders. I used the money I had saved from freelancing to launch my web design company. At first, it was just me, working out of my small apartment. I didn't have an office or a team, just my laptop and a dream. But I poured everything I had into that business. I hustled day and night, taking on as many clients as I could, doing everything from designing websites to managing social media accounts. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that was truly mine. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. As my business grew, I hired a few freelancers to help with the workload. I expanded my services, taking on bigger clients and charging higher rates. The money started coming in faster than I had ever imagined. I moved into a nicer apartment, bought a car, and finally felt like I had made it. But as I soon learned, success comes with its own set of challenges. It had been almost 3 years since I had any real contact with my family. After I moved out, we didn't keep in touch. There were no calls, no texts, no birthday cards. It was like we had silently agreed to go our separate ways. I didn't think much about them during those years. I was too focused on my business, on building a future for myself. So, when I got a text from my mom one evening, I was caught off guard. "Hey Jason, we haven't heard from you in a while. Would love to catch up. Let's have dinner soon." I stared at the message for a long time, not knowing how to respond. After everything they had put me through, why did they want to reconnect now? A part of me wanted to ignore the message, to block their number and pretend like they didn't exist. But another part of me was curious. Why now, after all this time? I didn't reply immediately. I spent the next few days thinking it over, going back and forth in my mind. Did they genuinely want to reconnect, or was there something else going on? Finally, I decided to meet them. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I needed to hear them admit they were wrong, or maybe I just needed to confirm what I had always suspected, that they only cared about themselves. I agreed to meet my parents for dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, one that I could easily afford now, but 3 years ago, it would have been out of my reach. I arrived a little early, my nerves buzzing. I hadn't seen them in so long, and I wasn't sure what to expect. When they walked in, I was struck by how different they looked. My dad had more gray hair, and my mom had a tired look in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. But despite their older appearances, the moment felt oddly familiar. My mom greeted me with a hug, smiling as if everything was fine, as if we hadn't gone years without speaking. "Jason, you look great," she said, her voice overly cheerful. I forced a smile, sitting down at the table with them. We exchanged small talk at first. How was work? What was I up to? But the tension was thick. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Why now?" I asked, my voice calm but direct. "Why are you reaching out after all this time?" My mom and dad exchanged a glance, and I knew something was up. My dad cleared his throat, looking a little uncomfortable. "We've heard about how well you've been doing. We're proud of you, son." I raised an eyebrow. Proud? Where had this pride been when I was broke, struggling just to get by? My mom smiled, but there was something forced about it. "We just thought, maybe we could help each other out." There it was. I felt the anger boiling inside me. They didn't want to reconnect because they missed me or because they regretted how they treated me. They wanted something from me. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. My dad sighed. "Things haven't been easy for us lately. Your mom's had some health issues, and I've been having trouble at work. We just thought, since you're doing so well, maybe you could help out a little." I stared at them, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. After everything I had been through, after years of silence, they had the nerve to ask me for help? "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "When I needed you, you turned your back on me. I had to figure it all out on my own, and now that I've made it, you want back in?" "No. I'm not here to bail you out." My mom's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel any sympathy. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. After that dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about my family. For years, I had been driven by anger, by the need to prove them wrong. I had built a life for myself without their help, and I was proud of that. But now that I had achieved the success I had always dreamed of, why didn't I feel satisfied? I started to realize that my anger, my resentment, had been fueling me for so long that I didn't know how to let it go. My entire life had been about proving myself, first to my parents, then to myself, and now that I had succeeded, I felt lost. I spent a lot of time reflecting on my childhood, on the way my parents had raised me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the lack of emotional support, the conditional love. My parents had always valued success and appearance over everything else, and when I didn't fit into their vision of what success looked like, they had abandoned me. But I wasn't that scared, angry kid anymore. I had built my own life, my own success, and I didn't need their approval. I had proved to myself that I was capable of more than they ever gave me credit for. As I processed everything that had happened with my parents, I realized that I didn't have to let them control my future. I didn't need their validation or their involvement in my life. But that didn't mean I had to close myself off from everyone else. I started reaching out to old friends, people I had lost touch with when I was struggling to survive. It wasn't easy at first. I had been so focused on my work, on building my business, that I hadn't made time for personal connections. But slowly, I began rebuilding those relationships. One of the people I reconnected with was Lauren, an old high school friend. We had drifted apart after graduation, but when we met up for coffee, it felt like no time had passed. She had been through her own struggles over the years, and we bonded over our shared experiences of trying to make it on our own. It felt good to talk to someone who understood what I had been through. And then there was Emily. We met at a networking event for young entrepreneurs, and from the moment we started talking, I knew there was something special about her. She was a graphic designer, working for a nonprofit, and she had this passion for helping people that I hadn't seen in anyone else. She wasn't impressed by my success or my money, she was interested in me as a person. We started dating, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be myself. I didn't have to prove anything to her. She reminded me that life wasn't just about work or success, it was about the people you shared it with. Just when I thought I had moved on from my family, I received an unexpected call from my younger sister, Rachel. We hadn't been particularly close growing up, there was a 6-year age gap between us, and we had always lived in different worlds. When I moved out, Rachel had still been in high school, and we had barely spoken since. "Hey Jason," she said nervously when I answered the phone. "I know it's been a while, but I really need to talk to you." I was surprised to hear from her, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of protectiveness. Despite everything that had happened with my parents, Rachel had never been a part of that. She was still a kid when I left, and I didn't blame her for any of it. "Sure," I said, trying to sound calm. "What's going on?" Rachel sighed on the other end. "Things have been really bad at home. Mom's been in and out of the hospital, and Dad's been drinking a lot. I don't know what to do, Jason. I feel like everything's falling apart, and I can't handle it on my own." Hearing this from her broke my heart. I realized that Rachel was now where I had been 3 years ago, stuck in a toxic environment, with no one to turn to. Despite everything my parents had done, I couldn't leave my sister in that situation. "I'll help you," I said softly. "We'll figure it out together." Over the next few months, I helped Rachel get on her feet. I paid for her to move out of my parents' house and helped her find a job. I didn't want her to go through the same struggles I had faced. Helping Rachel was like closing a chapter on that part of my life. I realized that I didn't need to cut off my entire family just because my parents had let me down. I could still be there for my sister, still build a relationship with her, even if things with my parents were complicated. We weren't always close growing up, but now, we were building a new relationship, one built on mutual respect and understanding. Rachel was finally free from the toxic environment that had consumed our family, and I felt like I had finally done something meaningful. A year has passed since I helped Rachel move out, and life has been good. My business continues to thrive, but more importantly, I've found a balance between work and life that makes me happy. I'm still with Emily, and our relationship has only grown stronger. She's helped me see that success isn't just about money or status, it's about the people you love, the relationships you build, and the happiness you find along the way. As for my parents, we still aren't close, but I've learned to make peace with that. I don't need their approval or validation to feel successful. I've built my own life, my own family, and that's enough for me. Looking back, I'm proud of everything I've accomplished. I went from being a broke 18-year-old, abandoned by my family, to building a successful business and creating a life I love. It wasn't easy, but every struggle, every challenge, has made me stronger. Final update: Finding peace in my own journey. Hey Reddit, it's been a long, difficult journey, but I've finally found peace. My family may have abandoned me when I was at my lowest, but I didn't let that define me. I built a life for myself, surrounded by people who love and support me. And in the end, that's what success really is, building a life you're proud of, with people who make you happy. Thanks for listening to my story, and here's to finding peace, happiness, and success on your own terms.